All right, welcome everybody. Here I am, Jim Drew. I am the creator of the Bliingboard64 campaign, and I guess we should probably check to see where we are on this campaign here. So let's see if I can share a screen, and this is what we should see. Okay, currently we are at 197%, 59,242. So that's where we stand with the campaign currently, which is great. That's far better than I ever thought it would do, actually. So that's amazing. So thank you for your support. So let's talk about the campaign, what it is. So basically, it is for a brand new computer keyboard, and the computer is a Commodore 64, and this is what it looks like. This is an actual pre-production unit, and this is a replacement, a direct replacement for the old keyboard. Let me grab one here. So if you're familiar with the Commodore 64, you'll probably be familiar with this. This is the keyboard that is actually inside of the housing. And we can grab ourselves a housing. So you can see that there's a mounting point in the back of this. And this will actually pass it through here. It mounts in the back. This is how the original mounts, you can see. And the Bliingboard mounts the same way. This is actually one of the questions I got repeated in the last couple of days is the video for the campaign shows the keyboard actually resting inside of the chassis without the lid on. And people wanted to know, does it actually fit with the lid on? Yes, of course it fits with the lid on. So no keycaps in here in this one, but you can see that it mounts and the mounting holds like it's supposed to. So that's what the campaign is replacement keyboard, and doesn't seem like much, except that if you're a Commodore enthusiast, you know how bad the keyboard was. And actually this project got started 2019, and based on the keycaps, actually based on Dallas Moore's cases that were being produced. They found the original molds from Commodore for the 64C, and so I thought, oh, it'd be great to have a keyboard. But it really goes back further than that. So back in 1983, my actual day job was designing hardware and writing software for the Commodore 64. And that lasted up to the death of the 64, went into the Amiga and stuff. But my 64, I literally typed on hundreds of thousands of lines of code on the original keyboard. And I was always replacing keyboards because they fail a lot. And so you could clean them. And if you look at the campaign video, that actually is just a 64 that I pulled out of inventory here. And I had no idea it was going to be that bad. I didn't actually do that on purpose. That's how bad some of the keyboards are. And so back in the day, back in the 80s, we had the exact same problem when you use the keyboard a lot. And granted, I use the keyboard a lot more than most people did because of the fact that, that was my actual day job. I'm writing code constantly, 24 hours a day when you're that young, really. So I knew from back then we needed a keyboard. And so fast forward now, we've got modern technology to build cases and everything you can think of now. And so I figured it's a good time to do it. Uses modern Cherry MX switches, which I'm using Gator on in this case. You can see these are standard PC switches that the keycaps go on. And so the keycaps, these keycaps are designed to fit directly onto the Cherry MX type of standard PC switch. The last campaign that I ran, we did keycaps for the original keyboard. And so those keycaps are not compatible with this because they're designed for Commodore STEM. They're totally different. And so as a result of that, I needed new keycaps. But the good news is I have a set of molds that have the outer shape that's perfect. And when I had the original molds made, I had them made so that they could be joined to a new bottom mold. So the new bottom mold actually is what we need for the small keycaps and large keycaps in order to fit the Cherry MX stems. We already have the molds for the outer shape. So that's what the campaign is is for generating the revenue to pay for the tooling for that, and also for paying for the tooling for the frame assembly. This basically is a plastic frame that fits around the circuit board, and it's really pretty stout. This is actually a resin printed 3D frame, which is not near as stout as how ABS or PC will be, but it's, you can stand on this and it's fine. So that kind of in a nutshell is what the campaign's about. We've got some electronics to drive it. When I designed this, I thought, knowing the way how things were during the pandemic, it was a real problem getting parts. And so the issue I had seen in the future is that what if we can't get electronic parts for the keyboard, like discontinued or something? So I thought, probably better just design it so that it's a modular system. So we've got, you can see this is actually one of the prototypes. This is actually from the video. Pull this off. So you can see that's a cherry stem with, you can see that this has got the little plus symbol in there. That's the actual receptacle for cherry MX switches. These are all resin printed keycaps. I'd love to show you production keycaps, but until the tooling's done, obviously we can't show you production keycaps, but these are all 3D resin printed that fit the cherry MX. So what I decided to do on this was to make it modular. We've got a plug-in electronics board that plugs into the keyboard itself. This made a lot more sense to me because if we need to change the electronics, we don't have to change this giant board, which is an expensive board to produce. We just change the little one. And then if we want to have different features in the future, we can simply just change these boards. And so I designed this, if you're familiar with 64, on the 64C, the keyboard connectors on the right-hand side of the motherboard, and on the 64 bread bin, the keyboard connectors on the left-hand side of the motherboard. So I made 2 ports for both sides. So you can actually just plug this board into either one of these sides here. I'll plug it into here. And so you can see, and then the cable actually will twist up and around and plugs in like this into the 64. And then for 64C, this is for the bread bin version. The 64C version is the same thing. It just goes up and then it rotates and twists in place. And this makes it much easier for future proofing because we don't have to worry about ever having to replace something giant board. It's a lot easier just to do this. So this is we call the SUPA board, which has all the standard electronics on it for all the whiz-bang stuff you want to do for monitoring each one of the keycaps individually. And this is a basic board, which is just basic. Basically, it's controls a soft shift lock, and also it has a standard pass-through for all the key switches. So the difference here really is that this has no frills other than it can do the backlighting and patterns and some random things, and then do the soft shift lock control, whereas the SUPA board, or what will be probably the Super Duper board, because we're only, $700 away from the stretch goal for that. This allows you to have key macro recording. It also lets you use a connection for a USB keyboard. So you can make this a USB keyboard. You can plug it into your PC or Mac or Linux system, and you can run Vice or any kind of emulator you want. And you could use your 64 keyboard as a real PC keyboard, or So that's in a nutshell what the campaign is about. And so let's see, the next goal is the Super Duper. Let's look at that. So the Duper, by the way, Super and Duper, that's just US slang for super duper. I guess it means other things in other languages I found. So interesting to know that. So the difference between the Super board and the Super Duper board is the new board will have Bluetooth capability. So you can be able to use this as a Bluetooth keyboard wirelessly. Theoretically, you could also send Bluetooth data to a Bluetooth speaker. So you could actually send sounds and stuff from the keyboard to a Bluetooth speaker. I guess if somebody wanted to do that, we could do that. That's the main difference. And then the biggest difference really is there's now a communication port between the keyboard and the Commodore 64. And so you have the ability to actually control the keyboard, have access to it from the Commodore 64 side. So you could actually write software on the 64 that would change the LED patterns. It could talk to the CPU that's on this, which it happens to be an ESP32 dual core CPU. So it's two 240 megahertz CPUs, way faster than a 1 megahertz 6502. So you could theoretically offload computations to the computer, the CPU inside the keyboard, and have a response from it. So if you wanted to send it trig functions or something and get the response back immediately, you could do that in microseconds instead of being milliseconds or seconds with a 6502. So that's the big difference between the DUPA and the non-DUPA is the Bluetooth and the dual core CPU with support for the 64 side. And I'm hoping that some of the demo scener people get a hold of these, that they can actually write some cool demos where you've got neat graphics and sound, and then they can actually, send commands to the keyboard to light up the LEDs in different sequences, or even use it for, doing sinus table calculations and things like that. So it's kind of neat things that we can do with this. So let's talk a little bit about the keycaps again, because some people are asking questions right now about keycaps. So again, I can't show you keycaps that are done because the tooling's not done. But like I had showed earlier, these are actual keycaps that are all resin printed from the data that's already been sent off to the company to get produced. So these are all functional. You can see in the video that I can type on it and stuff, but obviously, there's no printing yet either. They'll be printing. And so right now, our goal is at 70,000 to switch between the top only print and what we have in the original keycap campaign, which is the top and the faces are printed. So right now, with the funding goal where we are, we're strictly top printing, which is what the 64C used. If we get there, we get there. If we don't, we don't. We're going to have keycaps and keyboards in either way. So it's well past the funding goal we had set originally. So that's cool. Okay, with the keycaps, I wanted to say something else about keycap. Oh, yes. So one of the people asked me the other day again about mech board use. And so there's no way to make it work with a mech board. There's a couple different reasons. One, if you look at the mech board, it's a metal frame assembly, and the key switches pass through it, and they lock in place, and the circuit board's out behind it. And I didn't think it's a very good design because if you want to change your key switches for like a different tension, there's different grams of force you can do. There's clicky switches you can get. If you wanted to change something, or if a switch fails, you have to desolder the whole board on the backside really to get the single switch out. I actually got a frame here for a mech board, and you can get it out with a screwdriver, I guess, if you damage the outside of the frame, but that's not a very convenient way of doing it. But there's a couple different reasons why that this will never work with the mech board. One, the height difference is a difference because they use adapters for that. The height of the actual frame is actually different from what I used for this because we don't have an issue with that for controlling the height. I actually set this to be the correct height for the keyboard. In fact, I made this just a tad bit lower than Commodore did for the 64C because a 64C's keycaps actually stick out the side just a little bit because you see a gap between here and the case, and that should sit flush with it. So I made it a little bit lower. I think it's about 1 millimeter lower. But the biggest reason why it won't work is, let me grab another keyboard here. Okay, so this is a standard breadband keyboard, and you'll notice that if you look at the keycaps for the function keys, you can see that these are offset. And if you push down on here, right below or above the stem, they push down pretty nice. But when you push off to the side, they actually tilt, and there's actually pressure. So you can see that it tilts, and there's actually drag on this. So I didn't really like that, and I decided to actually center all of the key switches over every single one of these, no matter what the size were. So if you look at the Bliingboard, you're going to see that these are dead center. And because the mech board uses the original keycaps, they had no choice but to off-center the switches, and as a result of that, it won't work because it's physically off-center. for all the function keys, the restore key, the control key, and both the shift keys. They're all offset normally. Now, interesting to note, Commodore didn't make the actual keyboards. Mitsumi made the keyboards for Commodore. And at some point early on, Mitsumi actually made the keyboard for 64 that also was centered. It also uses similar type of Cherry MX switches. So it doesn't have the springs and such. So even some of Commodore's machines were done this way. And so these end up being centered. So this is actually out of my Silver series, one of my Silver series 64s. This is what they came with on the original ones. And I imagine they're probably very similar for the later VIC-20 ones as well. So, okay, let me go through a couple of video things here, or pictures. So let me share my screen real quick. Pop this up, and we're back to this. Okay. All right. So just renderings of the 64 of the keyboard here. So this is what it looks like with clear. The clear keycaps we have, because we already have the molds made for the top shape, they're not crystal clear like this. They're actually frosted slightly. The reason being is that that's how the original keycaps were done. There's actually it's a texture on the outside. It's a very fine texture on the sides, but there's a very definite texture on the top where your finger goes. So they won't be crystal clear like this, but it gives you an idea. So this is the installation of the board. This is the electronics, how it mounts. There's 2 mounting posts that are metal posts, and there's a connector, and so it holds it securely in place. It won't come out ever. Another view of this is a close-up view of it. This is how I did the stabilizer bars and the stabilizers. So the stabilizers themselves are identical to what's used on a PC. You can actually go to Amazon and buy parts for a regular PC keyboard, and there's a gazillion parts to buy. And as a result of that, it's fully compatible with anything you can come up with for it. So if you don't like the original colored bar, this is the stabilizer bar that comes with the kit or the assembled version of it, then you can replace it with your own parts. Another view of this. Here's a view of the keyboard from the outside, different angles. This is your keyboard that I have in the video I just showed you. So this is the key switches on here. So you notice in the video, all these light up very evenly. And so the reason for that is there's a big debate among keyboard people, and it's kind of been settled by the keyboard manufacturer, the key switch manufacturers. And that's north versus south. So what that means is that the LED is actually just slightly north of the, or above the switch itself. So it lights up more towards the top side of the switch, or the keycap and switch body, versus south, which means the LED is down below. So if you went to the VCF Midwest event, I was there and I brought a Bliingboard prototype with me. That was a south-facing LEDs, and it got bad reaction, which is I kind of expected anyway, because if the LED is down below this this row down here, I think you can see my mouse pointer here, you can actually see all the LEDs, because when you're typing at an angle, which is you look at the keyboard at an upward angle, you're going to see that the LED blinds you. All you can see, all the LEDs are raw. So I decided not to do that, and I did a bunch of research with different websites that handle, they specialize in keyboard construction and stuff, and a lot of crazy people out there building keyboards. But I learned that the switch is better off having the LED in more towards the top side, so it illuminates the keycaps correctly. And you can see in the video, the demo of the colors, it definitely lights up everything correctly. And another thing in that video that you probably don't know is that this gray space bar here, this gray space bar is actually solid. It's not a translucent color. And so you can see exactly how well the LEDs light up even a solid color pretty well. I mean, it's not totally solid because it's a gray color. So a black solid would be no light coming through it at all, but you get pretty good light through this, even though it's opaque style. So let's see. This is the bling board with the aftermarket parts. I actually put, these are ordered from Amazon. So it's gold and gold. So I just wanted to do it because, and so this is the kit version. Actually, this is a assembled version, sorry. So this is fully assembled. So this is what you would get with the thing. You get the bling board fully assembled with a cable that plugs into it and a set of keycaps and whatever colors you select. And you have the option of selecting the colors. And so that's pretty cool that we can do that. And I'll probably end up being like the original Keycap campaign, where you get to select different color function keys from and main keys and the large keys. I'm going to try to swing that. The quantity for this is really low compared to the Keycap campaign. We had almost 3,000 backers for the Keycap campaign, or actually 3,000 sets, 800 some, almost 900 backers. And so we don't have the quantity to do that. And then to run a color, there's a setup fee for each color you run on the injection molding process. So if you've got only 500 keyboards and 10 colors, that's a lot for each one. And so unfortunately, we can't have a ton of colors. So here's another view of this. So this is the original resin. I made this with the resin printer. I actually pieced this together in pieces. This is what my first idea was on this, which is much like the mech board. This was actually done in 2019, so quite a while ago. And then I abandoned this whole idea because it was too hard to get things out. You'd have to desolder the entire board. So this is the kit version of the bling board. And you can see what you get in the kit. You get the switches, which is basically 2 boxes of the Gatoron switches. These are premium switches, by the way. So if you go check out the cost of these on Amazon, they're expensive, but they're really good switches. It's the best that I found out of the bunch, and I figured no sense skipping on this thing. So we have our keycap colors we want. These are the frame assemblies and the cable and the screws for the frame assembly. There's a little switch over here, which is part of that box. These are stabilizers. And then there's the, this is a super board with the mounting hardware, and then the main board. So this is the entire kit that you would get if you had the kit version compared to if you're ordering one fully assembled. And here's another view of it. And this is the main board. There's 70 LEDs in this thing. And you can see here that they're the north facing. They're actually inside of the switch. So one thing about Gatoron and Cherry and ACO and a bunch of the companies that are all doing switches now, everyone's north, first of all. Everyone uses the north position. And the inside of the switch is actually hollowed out. There's a passageway for the LED to shine through. And most all switch bodies are either milky white or they're clear, and the top is always clear. And there's a Fresnel lens to amplify the light. So it actually makes it evenly dispersed throughout the entire keycap, which is great. You can see there's literally 70 switches up inside of this thing. And so on the stretch goal, the first one I got met was the second one was the N rollover. And so on the back side of this board, you're going to find 66 diodes that isolate each one of the keys from each other. So unlike the Commodore 64, the bling board itself actually has the ability to register any number of keys that are down. The 64 matrix still won't show you anything better than what the 64 would normally do, but when you use this on a USB compatible computer, it'll actually let you do each individual keys or multiple keys altogether and understand that. So that was kind of important for USB support. The frames, they look pretty simple, but they're actually a little bit complex. And I was surprised that the tooling was a little more expensive than I expected on these because of all the nooks and crannies we had to have. This is the kit that comes with the stabilizers. There's our switches. This is the molds. So if you've never seen a mold before, this is the inside of the mold for the bottom mold that we currently have on the original Keycap campaign. So you can see this is actually the inside of the keycap, and you can see the switch stem is a square. It's like a plus symbol here. On our new mold, it'll be round because it fits the PC switches instead of the Commodore stems. So it's pretty neat to see inside of this, but this is how complex the mold is. If you look at this, is the top mold for the large keycaps. And so you can see this is the actual shape that ends up being generated by it. So, and this is the finished product. So that's what we are looking for when we're done. And so you can see that the Currently, right now, the stretch goal is there. The keycaps will be printed on top, not the face at all, just the top only. And you can see how the whole thing fits together with this. And like I said, I've demoed this before, and you saw the video. And so I'm going to go take a look at all these questions that popped up. Let's see, people are hoping that gets to the process. So let's see, Mac keyboards. So the final stretch goal will enable the PS2 compatibility. So can we use this with 8-bit guys X16? Actually, yes. Oh, it's another thing we probably should talk about too. Let's talk about the final stretch goal if it ever gets there. So I will stop my sharing here. Okay. So when I was doing this, I decided I wanted to make a small, low-profile keyboard case for the Bliingboard. So I came up with this. So this is actually a functional box. And I had the display originally in the here. So I wanted to have a small display that would show you what was going on with the keyboard, like what keyboard mode it was in, what keys was being pressed, because it will do keyboard macro recording. So you can actually say that you want to assign Commodore X to be typing whatever, some long string of data, or if you want to assign a function key to be load comma 8 comma 1, kind of like a lot of the different fast loading cartridges have. So literally, you can actually type in an entire basic program if you wanted to, just by doing a key combo, which is kind of actually I do have a basic program in there that right now that I'm using for doing testing. It's my diagnostics for the keyboard. It just types a little basic program for me. So this case is something that I will be able to offer if we get to that point. This is like super expensive to produce for the tooling. And if there's a huge interest in, then I can do it. There's not enough funds in the campaign, even if we reach the max goal, to actually pay for it at all. So, but I would do it if there's enough interest in doing it. So this would let you interface. Let me pop up my screen sharing again so I can show you the actual case itself and how this works. Okay, so let's do this. There. Okay, so this is a case in SolidWorks. And so you can see in the back of this case is a DB25 connector. This DB25 connector allows you to plug it into a SX64 or to a Commodore 128D, or the USB port lets you have a USB. Now, it is possible with this port here that I can literally emulate PS2, XT, Amiga, pretty much anything that has a standard clock and data line for a keyboard out of this port. So whatever you can imagine. But the downside of this is that we can do this with the Bliingboard64 Super Duper board because there's an expansion port on it to do that. So that is possible right out of that keyboard. But remember, it's still a 64 that you're putting this into, unless you want to put this into some other case of your own design. But let me hide this. So this is the control board that's used for this, and you can see that it's the purple outline. That's where the board sits, is on top of this one. And this one is it's quite a bit different board. So it has the ability to do all these things with the emulation of different keyboards. It also has 2 internal ports. And so these 2 ports, one's for TFT and the other one's for an expansion port. And it's possible that we could actually put a display in this, because I wanted to have a display on the keyboard somewhere. And basically, I punched out the back side here so we could actually put in a display on top of it. So I can rotate this around here, except SolidWorks is not cooperating. There we go. So there's a couple of spots in the back side here. These are punch holes. So if you were to punch these out, either one of them out, you have a hole that you can pop out a harness for a display. And the display can be mounted on top of this in the back. You can use any size display you wanted. You can use a 3-inch display, or you can use a 0.096-inch display. Whatever you wanted to use, it supports any kind of this size displays. So literally, you can make this a game machine if you wanted to. I mean, that's how far you could go because the CPU is so powerful. Probably not necessary to do that, but it's a possibility. Currently, right now, I'm using aftermarket little flip downs for the height, which is kind of nice, the rubber feet in the front. So I don't think we'll probably get to the stretch goal, but who knows, maybe we will. But if there's enough interest in other areas, because this is really not Commodore specific per se, just like it's a guy had mentioned here in the questions about, using it's a PS2 keyboard. You could actually use this as a PS2 keyboard, and I have totally plans for doing this with a cable. So you'd have a DB25 to a very thin wire cable. So actually it's a PS2 cable that plugs in to a PS2 port. And so it'd be kind of a cool thing because you would have the original Commodore 64 key layout. And then for like the 128, because it has more keycaps than the 64 does. So look at my little window down here in the video. You can see this is a 128D keyboard. So it has 24 more keycaps. I actually have those ability to map those into 64's layout. So you can assign those to certain functions. Like if you hit Commodore, caps lock, even like Commodore and then shift lock, maybe that's the caps lock for the thing. So profile wise, you can see that this is pretty thin. That's the 128D, and this is this one. So if I can get these to line up here. So it's not too much different from here. And if you look at an SX64 keyboard, I just happen to have here. So here's an SX64 keyboard, and here's this case here. And so you can see that not too much difference here. Actually, this ends up being lower profile than this is by a little bit. So it's not a very big keyboard. So like I said, I don't know if we're going to get here or not, but this is one of the ways the easiest way to get to like a PS2 style keyboard compatibility wise. Okay, we look at here some more questions. Please support the Ultimate 64 instead, and don't split the 8-bit community. Well, the Ultimate 64 is already supported by default. As a result, it's because it's a 64, so you can pop this into an Ultimate, no problem. In fact, I probably should do that. I got one of Gideon's boards up here. I need to actually put it in a case. And 16 stabilizers are just normal stabs. Can you get anywhere selling keyboard parts? We can screw in the stabs or the clip-in only. So the stabs are exactly like a regular PC keyboard, which support both clip-in and the screw-in style. So either one works. And the keyboard that I showed earlier, wherever I went, because now there's a million keyboards everywhere. It actually, oh, here it is. It actually has the stabilizers I got from Amazon, and so these are they're clear instead of being black. Let me do a profile. Here we go. Might be better. Here we go. So these are clear stabilizers and with gold inserts, and then you can see that they actually screw in. There's actually screws instead of being a clip-in style. So the ones that come with a campaign are clip-in. The advantage of having the screw-in style is that some people like to have the pads. You can get a rubber pad that sits underneath the inner of the stabilizer, and that prevents the clanking noise. It deadens it, so it's quieter. So that is one advantage of doing that. You can still put them under the clip-in style, but they're hard to adjust, and so much easier when you do it that way. Let's see what else. Let's see approximately when can I select the keycap colors for my assembled keycap. Okay, so here's how this is going to work for selecting the colors. At the end of the campaign, I go to production. We get funding from Indiegogo. Finally, it usually takes about 7 to 10 days for them to actually send funding, which is weird. So once I get the funding, they get submitted in, molds get produced, parts come back to samples, the samples are approved, and then I get full production sample, and then it's actually into production, and it takes typically a week for production and then a week to however long you take for shipping. So it depends how much quantity there is. Now, it's funny is I just got the finalized quotes for the switches. And so Gatoron is the company I'm using. So the switches, they come in this box, which is kind of a neat box. It's very compact. It actually barely fits the keycaps in here, so it's perfect. And it securely puts them in a vacuum form thing, so they won't get damaged. So there's, I have to have 992 of these boxes to support the campaign so far. And that's a lot of boxes. So shipping costs are pretty high, even though they're pretty compact. So it may be that some of the items get shipped via sea, which is about 15 days for shipping instead of being about 4 or 5 days if it's coming via air. So that really will depend on it. Now, when you select your colors, it's going to be based on pretty much when I get stuff coming in. As soon as I know that the actual product is in and produced for real, and I have samples, I can start taking people's colors, but I won't be able to calculate the final shipping cost to everybody until we actually have their packages here. We'll have a pretty good idea based on each one of them, because I'm going to have a box for each one of the keyboards. And that's my plan, is to do a 16 by 6 by 2 inch box that holds the kit or the fully assembled version. And they'll have multiple of those boxes if there's multiple keyboards ordered. So when that occurs, when I can get the shipping information, I will contact you with what the shipping cost will be, and I will ask you at that time what the colors that you want will be. And if you're familiar with the color picker that we used last time for the Keycap campaign, we're going to use that again, and which is handy for me because it takes the customer information and attaches your colors to it. It worked out perfect last time. Shout out to Vince, who did the coding for that. It was great. And so that's what we've been doing for that. Okay, let me check a few more questions here. Let's see. I think it's also okay. Let's do 4. Yeah, okay. And I'm popping them out. So you guys can read the chat stuff over here on the side. It's interesting. So I don't think there's anything that actually I have not covered yet so far. I've covered most of all these questions so far. It seems like everyone wants to support the Bliingboard64, which is fine. I mean, Gideon's our buddy, so that, you know, we'll make sure we support all of his stuff for sure. So I think everything here is answered, unless you've got some other questions. If you've got any last minute questions here, guys, let me know, and then I can answer those questions. I'm not sure what the lag time is on YouTube right now for all this stuff. It's supposed to be super fast, but we'll see when the final video comes out. So, okay, there's no more questions. Oh, there's one more. So power comes from the 64's keyboard connector. Yes, that is true. So power does come in from the 64, and people have asked about the amount of power this uses. I actually posted pictures of the power consumption in my Discord. There's in the Discord, I've got full Bliingboard64 area with pictures and campaign info and such. So there's pictures in there of the consumption of the power, and full brightness is with all 3 LED colors. There's red, green, and blue in each one of the LEDs in the package. The max I could ever see was just under 300 milliamps with everything running full blast at the same time. And so the average that I saw, like doing the color demo, by the way, the color demo is only 30% brightness because the LEDs are so bright, you have to really turn it down, or otherwise it blinds you. I struggled with that with the camera doing that video, that I kept turning it down and down and down. It's like, man, the camera picks it up even better than our eyes do, but it's with 30% brightness for that, and that's plenty enough for everyday use for sure. And so in that video, the current consumption, the average was about 60 milliamps for that video during that time. So it's not much in the way of it. And then the CPU itself, it can use during a firmware update because it has Wi-Fi built in. It can use, I think the peak, and I think it's less than a millisecond, is 270 milliamps, but the average doing a firmware update is about 70 milliamps of current. So you're really not taxing the computer's power supply out at all. There's cartridges use more than that. I mean, Gideon's cartridge uses way more than that, and there's other cartridges, EEPROM burners. All these use way more current than the 64 Bliingboard64 campaigns keyboard uses. So let me see what else is here. Would it be possible to interface the DB25 connector of the standalone keyboard to the C64 connector? Yes, it is. That's another thing that somebody had asked me as well. In fact, a friend, Chris, asked about that. So yeah, it's out of the DB25. That actually is the keyboard matrix. That's how I did it. So, and there's 3 additional pins on there that we can use for doing like the clock and data lines for PS2 keyboards and such. And so yes, we can actually make a wire that plugs into the stock header. So that could be a wired remote keyboard. Now it is possible, since we are adding Bluetooth now with the Dupa board, I'm sure we'll reach that goal. It is possible to make a dongle that plugs into the 64, that's the receiver part, and it could actually be a wireless keyboard completely at that point, just on a little dongle that plugs in as well. So let's see. Next question. Didn't think I heard the answer. Is it possible? It's all 64 keycap possibilities. VIC-20. Yeah. So here's the deal with the printing wise. So this keyboard will work with a VIC-20. It'll work with a C16. It'll work with a PET, the educator version of the PET, which had the 64 keyboard. Literally anything that uses this particular form factor, we can support. Now the keycaps, especially if we don't reach the funding goal, will be UV printed on the tops only, which makes it a little more simplistic for the production because you don't have all the face printing going on. Because we're using UV printing process, I'll be able to actually print anything on the keycaps. Literally, you can put pictures of people, full color, I mean, the whole 9 yards. Anything you can think of, you can actually put on the keycaps. But since we want to support things like the C16 and the VIC-20 and such, especially the C16, where it has different keycaps in general, like it has function or the arrow keys and stuff. It's a different layout, but we'll be able to support those actual keycaps. So I can have a C16 keycap set, and we can have a VIC-20, specialized keycap set. We can change anything at any time. And my end goal here really is to have the ability to do like the color picker is right now for picking your colors, but have it so that you can select the face of your keycap and then upload a graphic to that image and then have that custom printed. So you can actually do a completely custom printed keycaps with color and the whole 9 yards. So that's my ultimate goal. After this campaign is done, finished, we can actually start doing things like that. Let's see. Test. Hello, test. Will Bliingboard be compatible with Dallas's 64 case? Yes, of course it is. In fact, I have got, if you're familiar with, this is Dallas's case. I actually have quite a few of these. And so this was used exclusively during my testing of this. And let me just slide this into here. So you can see that it slides in the slot, it fits into here. Pop the lid back on, and it all fits perfectly, of course. So this is how they're in and out. They've got these little latches at the bottom of it. And then on the top side here, you gotta notice that there's a screw here and then a screw here. And there's a little bit of wiggle room in here. And that's one thing that I should probably mention too, is that Commodore's keyboards, they weren't made by Commodore, they're made by Misumi. And one thing that I had found is that well, I confirmed with Leonard Tamel. He said there's at least 4 different designs of the keyboard that were made. And I'm sure Leonard's right. So this is one design that's got the notch at the bottom. Then there's the design that like this that actually has the notch at the top and no notch at the bottom. And then there's another design here. This design has a giant notch at the top. And then there's one more that I think it's got a notch off to the side of here a little bit and a notch at the bottom. It's like kind of like in between. So those are the 4 ones that I have got. And as a result of that, the hole spacing changed a little bit for each one of these compared to each revision. And so when I was designing this for the 64C, it's not an issue because there's no holes being used for anything other than the top hole here. But the mounting holes for inside of the case, for the posts, and if you look at these little posts that are mounted in here, so these are all slightly different. And depending on what revision of this case you've got, so if you look at the stamping that's inside of here, there's actually a stamp. Probably won't focus because that's how it works. If you want it to focus, it won't. So there's a stamp in here. It shows a part number and the date and all this. So there are different revisions of this. The spacing is slightly different on all the posts. So it actually took me a little bit of effort to make sure that this works. And that's why you see the holes are slightly elongated on here. I see, yeah, there you go. You can see that they're elongated right there. So that you can move the keyboard up and down, and there's a little bit of wiggle room left and right as well. So it will work with all the different 64s that are out there. It's one of those things that you learn when you're dealing with this, like, you know, Commodore stems, or, you know, 2 different stems that didn't fit each one of the keyboards and such. So that's the answer for that. Will Bliingboard be compatible with 64 Elite inside Dallas? Unfortunately, the MacBoard isn't. The keyboard cable won't clear the right side of the keyboard bracket. Good question. I don't know. I'll have to ask Gideon. I don't have an Elite. I have the standard one. So I'm assuming so, because the fact that I can make the electronics fit anywhere I want. I mean, so we've got a pretty big area in here to put electronics. And then I guess the worst case scenario, you wouldn't use the connector nearest wherever that problem is. You'd use the other one over here, and it's a longer cable. So I'm sure we can make it work. Shouldn't be an issue, I would think. Unless it hits a part of it. But Gideon's board's pretty small, so I don't think it'd be an issue. Okay, any other questions at all? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that we covered. I'm sure I've missed a ton of stuff. So if you have questions, if you're in the campaign or not in the campaign, I open up comments to anybody, so you don't have to be a backer to actually ask a question in the campaign itself. But I have a Discord, and I have a forum on the CBMSTUFF.COM website. You can ask questions there. I'm available through email as well. You can click on the email address that's actually in this link for the video, and you can get a hold of me. So if there's no other questions, I have to give one last shout out to my buddy Yuri. Today's Yuri's birthday, so happy birthday, buddy. Hope you're having a great day. And I'm going to sign off. Thanks, guys.